Derek Joseph Lueking was a 24-year-old young man who seemed to have his life on the right track. Born in Northern Virginia, Derek later moved to Louisville, Tennessee, where he worked as an orderly at Peninsula Behavioral Health Center. Standing 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing approximately 220 pounds, with green eyes, brown hair, and a short beard, Derek also had a special tattoo on his chest, Japanese characters that translated to the word life. An ironic detail, given what was about to happen. Derek was described by friends and family as reliable, organized, and punctual. Derek was quiet, but he wasn't meek, recalls his roommate, Ryan Molden. He had a servant heart, went overseas and helped the poor and those who needed a voice. He had graduated from Johnson University and seemed to have found a calling in helping others. He was exactly the kind of person you'd expect to see every day at work, with his alarm going off at the same time, with the same reliable routine. But in the weeks before his disappearance, something had changed. Family and friends noticed that Derek wasn't himself anymore. He started drinking a little bit and smoking cigarettes, which was highly unusual for him, said his father, Tim Lueking. He wasn't happy with his job, where his life was going. Derek was a huge fan of the television show Man vs. Wild, where host Bear Grylls was dropped into the wilderness with limited resources and forced to survive using nature while finding his way back to civilization. This obsession with survival would play a mysterious role in what was about to happen. It's March 15, 2012, an ordinary day in Tennessee. Ryan Molden, Derek's roommate, wakes up and leaves for work. Derek's alarm goes off and rings and rings. Ryan thinks Derek has already left and forgot to turn it off. But Derek hadn't gone anywhere. Or rather, he had left, but not for work. When Derek doesn't show up at Peninsula Behavioral Health Center, it's clear something is wrong. For someone so reliable and punctual, his absence was a major red flag. Ryan and Derek's family begin searching. They check Derek's computer and discover he'd been searching online for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and had made a reservation at a micro-hotel in Cherokee, North Carolina. On March 17, 2012, family and friends find him. Or rather, they find evidence of his trail. At the Microtel Inn and Suites in Cherokee, North Carolina, video footage shows Derek checking in. When they enter his room with police assistance, they discover a bizarre scene. A Bible on the bed and a bottle of liquor on the floor. It was so strange. There was a Bible on the bed and a bottle of liquor on the floor, just like he was thinking, Tim Lueking recalls. Then they go to nearby trails and find Derek's white Ford Escape, parked in the lower lot at Newfound Gap, at the state line between Tennessee and North Carolina. Derek had been declared missing 2 weeks earlier, on March 17, 2012. But what they find in the car chills their blood. Inside the vehicle was a note, "Don't try to follow me." That wasn't all. Derek's wallet was there, his keys were there, and most strangely, all his hiking equipment was still in the car. Derek had purchased an impressive amount of new survival equipment before leaving. Maps of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a Gerber axe part of a military survival manual, a knife sharpener, a Coleman combination compass and thermometer, 100 feet of black parachute cord, a headlamp, a pocket knife, granola bars, an iPod pouch, and a Bear Grylls survival kit that included a small flashlight, a fire starter, and a multi-tool. But the tent and sleeping bag, essential for overnight survival in March in the mountains, had been left in the car. It was March 17th when Derek was officially declared missing, but as early as March 3rd, he'd been seen leaving the Cherokee Hotel, wearing only a day pack. Authorities and family began piecing together the puzzle. Derek's disappearance coincided with the first anniversary of his grandfather's death, with whom he'd been very close. Derek's family and friends tried to decipher his intentions and motives, but every theory seemed to have holes in it. His family and I and many others have tried to figure out what was his intentions, his motives, what happened. Each time we have one, something pokes a hole in it, Molden said. The most disturbing part? Although it was a beautiful Saturday and the park was full of people, no one had seen Derek. The most disturbing thing about Lueking's disappearance is that no one they talked to Saturday had seen him, said Bob Miller, a spokesman for the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. There was a ton of people in the park that day. It was a nice day. Does it mean he got off the trail right away? Maybe. Once off trail, only the most experienced outdoorsman can successfully navigate the Smokies' 500,000 acres of wilderness, steep terrain, and dense forests. Derek, by all accounts, was not in this category. Going off trail not only increased Derek's chances of getting lost or injured, but decreased his chances of being found. Derek Lueking's case remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The National Park Service conducted extensive searches, but Derek was never found. The case is still listed on the official NPS website as unsolved. A bizarre twist appeared several months after Derek's disappearance. In the summer of 2012, searchers found a backpack and, later, human remains in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, near the area where Derek had disappeared. Families and authorities hoped the mystery would be solved, but the remains weren't Derek's. They belonged to Michael Giovanni Cocchini, 23 of Nashville, who had last been seen by friends at Walmart in Sevierville on March 18, 2012, one day after Derek was declared missing. Like Derek, Cocchini wasn't known as a hiker and had no gear for hiking or overnight camping. On September 6, 2012, an examination of the remains by the Sevier County Medical Examiner's Office, Knoxville Regional Forensic Center, and Knox County Sheriff's Forensic Unit determined they belonged to Cocchini. He was found only 0.3 of a mile from where his car was found in March. Forensic teams concluded it wasn't possible to definitively determine how Cocchini died, but there were strong suspicions he may have taken his own life. But Derek? Despite this discovery, no sign of Derek Lueking was ever found. On Derek's computer, investigators found the manuscript of an unfinished novel. The final paragraph sounded like a description of his own disappearance, fueling speculation that Derek had staged his disappearance. But if that was the plan, why buy all that expensive survival gear? Derek's mother runs a Facebook page dedicated to finding him, the last update being from November 2020. As you slip farther and farther away, we miss you still. The case appears in the NAMUS database and remains active. If Derek were found today, he would be 37 years old. It's tough to relive those things every day, looking at pictures, Tim Lueking describes. We are still hoping to find out what happened to him. It's a difficult thing to not have any closure on the situation. The family clings to their faith, praying that one day an answer will come. Two main theories persist. Derek entered the wilderness for a man versus wild experience and got lost or injured, or he left intentionally to escape his life, possibly for suicide around the anniversary of his grandfather's death. But the truth remains somewhere in those 500,000 acres of wilderness hidden from our eyes. If you have any information about Derek Joseph Lueking, contact Great Smoky Mountains National Park at 865-436-1230. Derek Lueking, a young man with a tattoo that said life, who disappeared into the mountains leaving behind only a message, "Do not try to follow me." Michael Allen Ficery wasn't your average tourist who gets lost in the woods. He was a man who lived for nature, a free spirit who breathed easier under the open sky than between the walls of a house. Born on March 30, 1954, Michael was 51 years old when he began his final adventure. He was a man standing 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing approximately 165 pounds, with shoulder-length gray hair, a gray beard, and green eyes. He wore glasses and was known for his nonconformist style. Someone described him as an off-the-grid kind of guy, meaning the type of person who prefers to live outside the conventional system. Raised in Southern California, Michael studied at the University of California and was known for his remarkable intelligence. His family said he had a photographic memory. He could remember in exquisite detail places he'd been to years ago. He worked for the U.S. Postal Service, but his true passion lay elsewhere: cycling, hiking, and above all, the wilderness, the untamed wildness of nature. Michael didn't own a cell phone, didn't have a computer, For him, technology was a distraction from what truly mattered. Friends and family said he was happiest when alone in nature, far from civilization. He had over 30 years of experience hiking through wilderness areas. He knew Yosemite like his own backyard. But experience, as we'll see, isn't always enough when the mountains keep their secrets. It's June 15, 2005. An ordinary Wednesday at Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in the northern part of Yosemite National Park. This area, situated at 3,183 feet above sea level, is renowned for its natural beauty, but also for being much less visited than Yosemite's tourist zones. Here in 1934, a reservoir was built that now supplies water to San Francisco, 167 miles away. Michael Ficery had carefully planned this solo hike. His objectives were clear: Rancheria Falls, Till Mountain, Lake Vernon, then through Beehive back to Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. An ambitious route, but not impossible for someone with his experience. He had a wilderness permit valid until June 19th. That morning, Michael began heading north up the Pacific Crest Trail toward Till Mountain. The area is relatively lightly visited compared to other places in Yosemite, perfect for someone seeking solitude and the peace of nature. Then something happened, something we'll never know with certainty. Michael's family began to worry when his wilderness permit expired on June 19th and he hadn't returned. On June 24, 2005, they called the Park Service, and a massive search operation was launched. What the search teams found was more disturbing than if they'd found nothing at all. Michael's backpack was discovered near Till Mountain, just off the trail. The location was described by park authorities as being on extremely rugged and hazardous terrain. It wasn't on his planned route, and several items were missing from the backpack. But Michael, no trace, no sign. As if he had evaporated. The National Park Service launched the most expensive search operation in Yosemite's history up to that point. The cost, $452,000, almost $500,000. Search teams from 5 different county agencies, helicopters, specialized search dogs, all were sent to the Till Mountain area. Days passed, searches expanded, but Michael Ficery remained an enigma. His sister, Honor Boone, traumatized by her brother's disappearance, later founded a company called Pack 6, which equipped hikers with pre-assembled survival kits: compass, knife, multi-tool, headlamp, fire starter, signal mirror, and whistle. She firmly believed that Michael, though never reliant on technology, hadn't been adequately prepared for that hike in terms of the equipment he had with him. The area where Michael disappeared is vast and could easily hide illegal activities, methamphetamine or marijuana production. There are theories that Michael might have encountered criminals operating in the area and was killed to keep him quiet. Another theory suggests he took his water container to refill it from the river at the base of the slope where his backpack was found, slipped into the water, and was swept away by the current. But none of these theories explain how a hiker with 30 years of experience, with photographic memory and deep knowledge of Yosemite, could disappear without leaving the slightest trace. Nearly 20 years after his disappearance, Michael Ficery's case remains open and unsolved. The National Park Service continues to list the case on their official Cold Cases website. Michael is listed under the missing person category. There's no evidence of what happened to him. There's no body. There's no story with an ending. In a comment that appeared in 2012 on National Parks Traveler, likely written by one of his sisters, it states, Michael Ficery, the hiker mentioned above who disappeared in Yosemite in 2005, was my brother. While Michael was never reliant upon technology, he never owned a cell phone or computer, I firmly believe he was not adequately prepared for his hike in terms of the equipment he did carry. The case also appears in the name use database, National Missing and Unidentified Person System, under number MP55057, where it's still listed as unsolved. The National Park Service spent nearly $500,000 searching for Michael, the most expensive search in Yosemite's history at that time. This represents 1/4 of Yosemite's entire SARE, search and rescue, budget for 2005, which was a $1.2 million, figures that demonstrate the seriousness and scope of the operation. But the mountains of Yosemite have not revealed their secret. Michael's family continues to search for answers. Friends and fellow hikers discuss theories in their circles. But the truth remains somewhere out there, in the wilderness near Till Mountain, hidden from our eyes. Michael Ficery, a man who loved nature more than anything, and who is now part of it in a way we'll never understand. Morgan Elias Heimer was the kind of young man you see and immediately know belongs to nature. Born in Cody, Wyoming, Morgan was 22 years old when he began his final adventure on the Colorado River, through the heart of the Grand Canyon. Morgan spent his childhood and early adult years exploring the open wilderness, falling in love with nature. He was studying English at the University of Wyoming, but as an experienced outdoorsman and amazing swimmer, Morgan set his career sights on becoming a river guide. He was the type of person who felt more at home on water than on land. Friends and family described him as passionate about literature and poetry. At camp, he was a literature guy and a poetry guy, and so at night he would pull out a book and do dramatic readings of poetry and prose about the canyon. Morgan was working for Tour West, a commercial rafting company, and was on the Colorado River on an 8-day expedition through the Grand Canyon. It was day 6. Everything was going perfectly. Morgan had done his job impeccably until then. The clients were happy. The weather was beautiful. No one could predict that, in a few hours, Morgan Heimer would become one of the most baffling mysteries in Grand Canyon National Park history. It's June 2, 2015, approximately 4:00 p.m., at River Mile 213 near Pumpkin Springs in Grand Canyon National Park. Pumpkin Springs is a unique orange rock formation jutting out of the canyon wall on the canyon floor that's shaped like a pumpkin with rounded walls and vertical streaks down its sides. The water held within the formation is warm, but it's certainly not advised to swim in it, as there are high levels of arsenic, lead, zinc, and copper. The rafting group had just finished an activity where clients jumped off a low cliff into the water. It was a fun, relaxing activity. The last client had completed the activity, and Morgan and the lead guide had switched positions. The lead guide spoke with Morgan about taking some time off that afternoon. Morgan seemed agreeable. The guide walked away from the cliff to talk to a client. It was just a short conversation, maybe 30 seconds, a minute at most. When the guide turned around, Morgan was gone. Initially, the guide assumed Morgan had gone on break, as they discussed. It was a bit odd but not alarming. People take breaks. Guides need moments for themselves. But the afternoon passed. The group swam in the river. They served dinner, and Morgan hadn't appeared. At 7:26 p.m., a member of the group reported Morgan missing. A satellite phone call was made to GRCA Dispatch, Grand Canyon. Morgan Heimer was last seen wearing a dark-colored Astral personal flotation device, a blue plaid long-sleeve shirt, Chaco flip-flop sandals, a maroon baseball cap, brightly colored shorts, and carrying a purple water bottle. Morgan had disappeared in a small area enclosed by cliffs. There didn't seem to be many places where he could go. It was a relatively confined space. How could someone disappear there? On June 3rd, NPS personnel flew to River Mile 213 and contacted the group. The helicopter searched the river. Extensive searches began. Search and rescue teams thoroughly searched the river and surrounding areas between mile markers 211 to 215. When nothing was found, they extended the search to Diamond Creek, 12 miles west of Pumpkin Spring. Tour West employees, members of the rafting group, other river guides, and their groups were interviewed, but nothing about Morgan's disappearance was uncovered. The search lasted 6 days. The River Mile 213 area is busy during the summer months. On average, one private trip every other day goes from Diamond to Pierce, 2 a day that take out at Pierce. Add in an average of 4 Hualapai River Runner boats from Diamond to Pierce daily, plus the Canyon Jet boat service sends an average of 1 boat a day up from Pierce to around Separation Canyon and back. There are 2 commercial trips per day in the area. In other words, the area is heavily trafficked. If Morgan had been there, someone should have seen him. On July 23, 2015, rangers launched from Diamond to investigate a report of bird activity at RM 220 toys. They searched eddies on both sides of the river up to RM 217. At RM 220, they searched the shoreline. No new clues were found. They were unable to determine what the birds may have been interested in. A veteran river guide who had worked for Tour West for 25 years, with over 200 Grand Canyon trips, said, I worked for Tour West for 25 years. I have over 200 Grand Canyon trips. This is very strange indeed. If he disappeared at Pumpkin Springs, I find that hard to believe. On the opposite side of the canyon is a place 300 meters up from the river, a place we call Robber's Roost, a long-forgotten camp. No one knows why it is there. There is an old trail out of the canyon there. Could he have been mad at someone and attempted to walk out? Morgan Heimer's case remains completely unsolved nearly 10 years after his disappearance. It's listed in the NAMUS database, National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, under number MP29029, as unsolved. The case also appears on the National Park Service's official lists. The search lasted 6 days before authorities assumed Morgan might have drowned. His body has never turned up, and there was no trace that he was still alive after June 2, 2015. The National Park Service published an official document about the search. The search was intensive and expensive. Morgan's parents came to the disappearance location to understand what could have happened. Morgan's father was an athlete, and he wanted to go to that PLS, place last seen. A father who wanted to feel the air, to be in that space, hoping perhaps to feel his son's breath in the air. Writer Kate Gale, whose cousin Lisa was Morgan's mother, wrote on her blog, "Morgan Heimer, my cousin Lisa's son, has been missing since Tuesday. He was one of the guides on a river rafting trip in the Grand Canyon. He disappeared Tuesday night." She described the frustration and confusion. The area where he disappeared is a small area enclosed by cliffs. It didn't seem as if the search could take very long. There is no concern of predators. He was an athlete and a strong swimmer, and he was wearing a life preserver. At this time, no trace has been found. Theories abound. The most likely official explanation is that Morgan somehow drowned in the Colorado River, and his body was caught under a rock or branch or swept away by the current. But how could a strong swimmer, wearing a life vest, drown in that area without anyone hearing or seeing anything? Another theory is that Morgan left intentionally. Maybe he was mad at someone and tried to walk out using the old trail leading to Robber's Roost. But why would he do that? And how would he survive in the Grand Canyon without supplies? There's also the suicide theory. Without knowing anything about his mental health or what his life was like, we can't jump to conclusions. But the fact that he needed to take a sudden and immediate break from his work could suggest he was struggling with something that felt like a priority to him. Morgan's case raises disturbing questions. How does an experienced rafting guide, a strong swimmer, disappear in a small area in broad daylight with an entire group nearby, without anyone hearing or seeing anything? The Grand Canyon is known for its mysteries. Approximately 700 people have died in the Grand Canyon since modern record-keeping began, in incidents ranging from drowning to air crashes to suicides. Occasionally, people disappear and are not found. A year before Morgan's disappearance, another river guide had disappeared under strange circumstances. Joshua Frenchy Tourget, 34, a guide for oars, disappeared on September 12, 2014. His body was found a week later, near where he disappeared. But the case raised many questions about safety on the Colorado River. But unlike Tourget, Morgan Heimer was never found. Pumpkin Springs remains a popular destination for rafting expeditions. The orange pumpkin-shaped formation continues to attract visitors. But for Morgan's family, it's the place where their son's life ended in an inexplicable moment. If you have any information about Morgan Elias Heimer, contact Grand Canyon National Park. Morgan Heimer, a 22-year-old who loved literature and poetry, who had found his calling as a rafting guide, who disappeared in an instant on the Colorado River, leaving behind only unanswered questions. Investigators believed Morgan had the skills and experience to survive if he was lost out there, and they completely expected to find him. But the Grand Canyon has not revealed its secret. Thelma Pauline Melton, whom everyone knew as Polly, was a woman who could never stay still. Born on February 26, 1923, Polly was 58 years old in the summer of 1981, an age when many people think about retirement and peace. But not Polly. Standing 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing approximately 170–180 pounds, with auburn hair and brown eyes, Polly was an imposing presence. She wore glasses and had health issues. She suffered from high blood pressure and nausea, for which she took medication. She smoked 2 packs of Virginia Slim cigarettes a day. But none of these problems kept her away from what she loved most, the mountains. Polly and her husband, Robert Bob Melton, who was 78 years old in 1981, thus 20 years older than her, spent the months from late spring to late fall, parked at the base of the Great Smoky Mountains in Swain County, North Carolina. They had an Airstream trailer with all the amenities they needed, and the campground was leased to a small cluster of 10 families who admitted new members only after careful vetting, a kind of homeowners association for campers. They had married in 1975, after meeting when Polly was living at her father's trailer park property in Swain County. Robert was a co-owner. Due to his condition and age, Robert stayed behind in the Airstream when Polly went hiking with friends. But Polly was busy in other ways, too. Most weekdays she volunteered in town at Bryson City Presbyterian Church Nutrition Center, where she handed out meals to seniors. She was also a caretaker for Robert, who was in poor health. Polly knew Deep Creek Trail like the back of her hand. She'd spent nearly 20 years hiking that trail. It was her favorite trail, the place where she felt most at home. Friends said she was extremely afraid of snakes. She was not the type who would leave the trail to venture into the dense forest. In the year before her disappearance, Polly's mother had died, and Polly was struggling with depression. Her pastor mentioned this. She had been prescribed Valium in 1979 as a muscle relaxant, but had stopped taking it before 1981. However, after her disappearance, her husband's bottle of Valium was discovered to be missing. The day before her disappearance, Polly had made several phone calls using the phone at her volunteer job. She had never used the phones in the 4 years she'd been volunteering. Law enforcement was unable to trace the calls, so we don't know if they were connected in any way to her disappearance. It's September 25th, 1981, a Friday in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Polly Melton is preparing for one of her usual hikes on Deep Creek Trail, a trail classified as easy. It wasn't difficult terrain to be particularly worried about. That morning, Polly had done something unusual. She'd skipped going to the volunteer job she went to every day to hand out meals to seniors. Before leaving for her hike, she'd prepared sauce for the spaghetti she intended to cook for dinner and had taken a short nap. Polly left with 2 friends, Trula Gudger and Pauline Cannon, for a leisurely walk on Deep Creek Trail. Robert, her husband, remained in the Airstream, as was his custom. At 4 p.m., the 3 women were returning on the trail toward camp. Everything was normal. Another ordinary day in the mountains. Then suddenly Polly picked up her pace. "I wouldn't want to be in a foot race with you, Polly," one friend called out jokingly. Polly turned, laughed, and kept her quick pace. Her friends watched her disappear over a crest on the gravel hiking trail that wound through the mountains. It was only a few seconds, maybe a minute. When the friends reached the top of the hill, they expected to see Polly catching her breath on one of the public benches. Polly wasn't there. She wasn't on the benches. She wasn't anywhere on the trail. The friends began to search. They asked several people, but no one had seen Polly. They went back to the campground, assuming Polly had returned ahead of them and was waiting there. But when they arrived at the Airstream, Robert said he hadn't seen her. She hadn't come back. The friends searched again and asked more people before going to the park ranger, where Polly was officially reported missing. A massive search was launched. People searched the entire park, even the creek that ran next to the trail where Polly had walked, but no one seemed to find her. Although there were so many people in the park and near the trail where Polly went missing, no one seemed to have spotted her. They tried to follow her footprints, but they got muddled with others. And then came the moment that froze everyone's blood who was involved in the search. Search dogs were brought in. They're trained to track the scent of missing people. When the dogs arrived at the spot where Polly's friends had last seen her, they began trotting in circles and howling, as though she had simply ceased to exist, as if she had evaporated. Both the dogs and the search party went a long way in convincing authorities that, dead or alive, Polly was no longer in the park. "We are just puzzled at this point," Park Ranger Chuck Harris told a reporter. Over 150 people and 9 search dogs searched for Polly, but to no avail. The trail from which she disappeared was reopened on September 29th, and the search officially ended on October 2nd of the same year. Polly Melton had known that trail for nearly 20 years. The family couldn't believe she would leave of her own free will and feared foul play. She had no access to a car that summer, so she had no car keys. If she took money, identification, or medicine with her, these items had been concealed from her friends. She had her cigarettes with her, being a heavy smoker, but no cash, no ID, no medications. But a detail was discovered that made everything even stranger. Polly was wearing shoes with crepe soles, size 812, and the left sole had a crack across the ball of the foot, which would have given distinctive footprints, but no such tracks were found. Thelma Pauline Polly Melton's case remains unsolved over 40 years after her disappearance. It's listed on the National Park Service's official website as a cold case, classification endangered missing, but the story has a twist so strange it seems taken from a movie. In April 1982, 7 months after her disappearance, a check written to Polly Melton was cashed in Birmingham, Alabama. Investigations led to a dead end. Who cashed it? Why? How did it get there? Records show a Thelma Pauline McAllister living in Alabama as a child, and even a Pauline McAllister Melton is buried in Alabama. But the exact connection remains unclear and unproven. This discovery gave rise to an intriguing theory. Maybe Polly had planned to disappear that day. Maybe she was so dissatisfied with her life that she chose to walk away from it. For an active woman like Polly seemed to be, it would be difficult to be with someone who was unhealthy enough to participate in the things you enjoyed. So what if she met someone and spent all that time on her work phone arranging everything? And then on that day she quickened her pace so she could leave her friends behind, went to a predetermined location to meet, and make a new life with her lover. On the other hand, the family couldn't believe she would leave of her own accord. She'd left behind her pets, a dog and cat, her wallet, identification, passport. Polly was afraid of snakes and wouldn't have left the trail into the forest. Her husband, Carl Melton, who had worked 17 years at J.P. Morgan Chase as assistant director of the firm's worldwide security operations, was devastated. He couldn't understand how his wife, on a trail she knew so well, could disappear. The case remains in the National Park Service files. In 2022, over 40 years after her disappearance, authorities reminded the public about Polly, asking for any information that might help solve the mystery. Author Juanita Baldwin researched missing persons cases, including Polly Melton's, and wrote a book titled Unsolved Disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains. Digging through boxes of park records and interviewing friends still alive, Baldwin pieced together Polly's story. If you have any information about Thelma Pauline Polly Melton, contact Great Smoky Mountains National Park at 865-436-1230 or the National Park Service at email protected. Polly Melton, a woman who loved the mountains, who knew every canyon, who hiked Deep Creek Trail for nearly 2 decades. A woman who in one moment picked up her pace, disappeared over a hill, and was never seen again. Was it a planned escape, a tragedy? Or something much more sinister? The mountains keep the secret. Barbara Assunta Bolick was the embodiment of the adventurous spirit. At 55 years old in 2007, Barbara wasn't the type of woman who was content with a quiet life in front of the television. She was a natural athlete, a passionate runner, and above all, an experienced hiker. Barbara had had an impressive career. After meeting her husband Carl when he was still an Air Force officer working on an air base in New Jersey, the two had married and lived in various places. Carl had worked for 17 years at J.P. Morgan Chase, where he became assistant director of the firm's worldwide security operations. In 2001, after Carl retired, the two moved to Corvallis, Montana. Carl had grown up in Montana, in Dillon, but Barbara had never lived in this state. The first time she saw the Bitterroot Valley, she fell hopelessly in love with the place. Although they initially tried to settle in Dillon, Carl's hometown, Barbara couldn't get used to the wind and cold there. But when they saw the Bitterroot together for the first time, Barbara knew immediately that was her place. They bought land near Darby, then settled in a home near Corvallis. Barbara was small in stature, only 5 feet tall and 115 pounds, but full of energy. She had auburn hair, brown eyes, pierced ears, and wore glasses. On that fateful morning, she was wearing a pastel-colored shirt, tan shorts, and had a black daypack with her. What many didn't know was that in that backpack, Barbara always carried a .357 Magnum pistol. She wasn't the type to venture unprepared into nature, and she didn't need to be. She knew every curve, every switchback, every portion of the Bear Creek Overlook Trail. She'd walked that trail hundreds of times. It was her favorite trail. After Carl suffered a heart attack, he could no longer go hiking with her. "We used to hike a bit together before I had my heart attack and couldn't go anymore," Carl said. "I think she hiked every canyon here. She knew them all pretty well." Barbara wasn't just a hiking enthusiast. She was an energetic hostess who loved showing visitors the scenery around Bear Creek Overlook. Every time someone came to visit, Barbara would take them on that trail special to her. She had a known fear of heights. Her husband emphasized that Barbara would never have approached the edge of a precipice and wouldn't have left the trail. It's the morning of July 18th, 2007, Wednesday, in Bitterroot Valley, Montana. The sky is clear and the air is fresh. Barbara Bolick is preparing for another hike on her favorite trail, Bear Creek Overlook, a moderately challenging 2.6-mile trail that offers spectacular views of the valley below. Visiting Carl and Barbara were Carl's cousin, Donna K. Biles, and her boyfriend Jim Ramaker, 58, from California. They had initially planned for both Donna and Jim to go with Barbara on the Bear Creek Overlook Trail that Wednesday morning, but Donna wasn't feeling well and stayed home. Carl, who could no longer go hiking due to his heart attack, promised his wife he would prepare dinner while she and Jim went on their expedition. Jim Ramaker had been in Montana to visit Donna and the two Bolicks. It was the first time Barbara had met Jim. They'd only met a few days before, but for Barbara that didn't matter. She was happy to show anyone the beauty of her beloved mountains. The two climbed the trail without problems. Bear Creek Overlook Trail is in the Bitterroot National Forest, so initially U.S. Forest Service rangers were responsible for the investigation. They reached the overlook point and admired the scenery. Jim wanted to stop and enjoy the views once more on the way down. Between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. as they descended from the mountain, Jim stopped to admire the scenic view. Barbara was only 20 or 30 feet, 6 to 9 meters away from him. She was literally within shouting distance. Jim looked at the scenery. He breathed in the fresh mountain air. Maybe he took a mental photograph of that beautiful moment. When he turned around, in less than a minute, Barbara was gone. Jim began to search. He called out for her. "Barbara, Barbara." Nothing. No response, no sound of footsteps, no sign that anyone had been there. He searched the area. He called out again, but Barbara Bolick had evaporated like smoke. Jim quickly descended to the trailhead, almost expecting to find Barbara there, laughing at the confusion. Maybe she'd fallen and been slightly injured and descended quickly. Maybe she'd returned to the car for some reason. But Barbara wasn't there. Jim immediately alerted the authorities. The ranger who contacted Carl at home to inform him that his wife had gone missing was optimistic that they would find her soon. Carl found it hard to believe that Barbara was disoriented. She'd hiked that trail hundreds of times. He immediately drove the 20 miles to the trailhead, expecting to see Barbara and have a good laugh together about the whole thing. He was devastated when he arrived and Barbara hadn't been found. All night, people continued searching for Barbara. Several ground search and rescue teams, aided by canine search specialists, were sent to assist in the operation. And then came the moment that baffled everyone. Search dogs, those animals trained to detect the faintest human scent, found absolutely nothing, no scent. It was as if Barbara had never been there. The Bear Creek Overlook Trail is well-traveled and populated, and most visitors stick to the graveled walking path. The idea that Barbara would have wandered into the dense woods seemed unfathomable. The family said she was extremely afraid of snakes. She wasn't the type who would leave the trail. Searches expanded day by day. Helicopters flew over the area. Specialized teams combed every square inch. But Barbara Bolick was not found. Over time, an intriguing piece of information emerged. Authorities were seeking two young men as possible witnesses. Two men in their early 20s, accompanied by a black mixed-breed dog with floppy ears and white markings, were seen hiking in the area around the time Barbara went missing. One of them was described as dark-skinned with black hair, and the other had a medium complexion and reddish hair. Both men were clean-cut, and each had an athletic build. They may have been driving a light-colored older model Chevrolet S10 SUV with Missoula County, Montana license plates. It should be emphasized, neither of the men is considered a suspect in Barbara's case, but investigators believe they could provide valuable information. Barbara's family offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to their identification. But these men never came forward, not even for $10,000. Why? It's a question that continues to puzzle everyone involved in the case. 17 years after her disappearance, Barbara Bolick's case remains an active investigation and one of the most baffling mysteries in Montana's history. It's listed in the Charlie Project and in official law enforcement databases as unsolved. Classification: missing under suspicious circumstances, not believed to have left of her own accord. Jim Ramaker, the family friend who was with Barbara when she disappeared, fully cooperated with authorities from the beginning and offered to take a polygraph test before returning home to California. But the test was never administered. He was quickly eliminated as a suspect. In an interview with the Missoula Independent, Ramaker said he was frustrated about the lack of closure in the case. He reiterated what he'd told law enforcement: "I never laid a hand on Barbara. I never harmed her in any way," and added, "I've had a cloud over my head since 2007. Police received many dubious tips over the years, but none led anywhere. Carl Bolick, the devastated husband, lives with a view of the Bitterroot Mountains from his kitchen window. None of it makes any sense," he said, staring out the window toward the cloud-shrouded mountains. "None of it makes any sense. She was only 20 feet away. That's not that far." The emotional toll on Carl was immense. He had lost not just his wife, but his entire sense of security and understanding of the world. The case challenged fundamental assumptions about reality and safety that most people take for granted. "I just couldn't accept it," Carl said later. "I just knew that she was going to show up one way or another, but it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened." The broader community was also deeply affected by Barbara's disappearance. The case received extensive media coverage throughout Montana and beyond, with many people following the investigation closely. The fact that an experienced hiker could simply vanish without a trace on a familiar trail challenged everyone's sense of safety in the outdoors. In 2023, the Missoula County Sheriff's Office and authorities from Ravalli County issued another public call for information. Barbara would be 71 years old if found alive today. Contact Special Agent Lee Oley at 406-830-8220, Special Agent Norm White at 406-830-7006, or Ravalli County Lieutenant Zay Hudson at 406-375-4020 if you have any information. Theories abound. Some believe foul play was involved, though Jim Ramaker was eliminated as a suspect. Others have wondered if a mountain man seen in the area might have played a role. But no evidence supports this. There are even those who have wondered if Barbara left of her own accord, though she left behind all her belongings, including her pets, wallet, identification, and passport. Her husband emphasized that Barbara was afraid of heights and would not have approached the edge of a precipice or left the trail. The most disturbing aspect of the case remains the simple physical impossibility of the disappearance. In an open area on a well-traveled trail in broad daylight, with a hiking partner only 20-30 feet away, how does a person disappear in less than a minute without leaving any trace, any sound, any scent for search dogs? It's a question that has haunted investigators, the family, and anyone who truly thinks about this case. Barbara Bolick's case has had lasting implications for how people think about outdoor safety in Montana and beyond. Her case demonstrates that even experienced hikers on familiar trails can face unexpected dangers. It has prompted many people to reconsider their safety protocols when venturing into wilderness areas. The case has also highlighted the importance of hiking with multiple companions when possible and maintaining constant communication with others about hiking plans and expected return times. Despite all these precautions, Barbara disappeared. She had a weapon with her for protection. She was hiking with a companion. She knew the trail like the back of her hand. And yet, in one moment, she became part of the unsolved mysteries of the mountains. From his kitchen in Corvallis, Carl Bolick can look across the Bitterroot Valley toward the place where his wife vanished from the face of the earth. "I still can't accept it," he said. "I just knew that she was going to show up one way or another, but it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened." 17 years after that clear July morning in 2007, Barbara Bolick's disappearance continues to confound investigators, challenge logical thinking, and haunt everyone who has encountered the case. It represents one of those rare mysteries that seems to exist outside the boundaries of normal human experience. The case forces uncomfortable questions about the limits of our understanding and the possibility that some events simply cannot be explained within the framework of conventional thinking. In a world where technology and forensic science can solve crimes decades after they occur, Barbara's disappearance stands as a stark reminder that some mysteries may never be solved. For the people of Montana's Bitterroot Valley, Barbara's case serves as a constant reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the landscape they call home. It's a place of extraordinary beauty, but also of hidden dangers and unexplained phenomena that can change lives in an instant. Barbara Bolick, a woman who found her paradise in the Bitterroot Mountains, who knew every switchback of her favorite trail, who disappeared in less than 60 seconds on a beautiful summer day, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a husband who still looks toward the mountains waiting. The $10,000 reward for information leading to the identification of the two hikers with the dog remains in effect. These men, who would now be in their late 30s or early 40s, represent the best hope for independent verification of the events of July 18, 2007. The Bitterroot Mountains keep their secret, and Barbara Bolick remains one of the most impossible disappearances in American history.